get going. Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Fisher. I'm a professor here at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. And I have sort of marshaled the group, both students and faculty, who will be talking with you today. It's something that we're trying for the very first time. And the intention behind this is to try and create a bridge between or close in some of the holes or gaps, the information asymmetries about doing a PhD in entrepreneurship. I know for myself personally, I'm from South Africa. And when I first learned about the idea of maybe doing a PhD at some point in the future, when I was deciding that I might want to do or pursue a career in academia, I really had very, very little information about what a PhD would look like, in particular, what it might look like coming from outside the US to a United States-based school, what the funding would look like, what the curriculum would look like, what the process would look like. And I realized that information asymmetry is a bit of a disadvantage to a lot of people. And as a result of that, I've been contemplating how do we fill in that gap and allow everyone who's contemplating doing a PhD, in particular in entrepreneurship, to understand what that might entail. And this is one of the mechanisms that I think can help facilitate a deeper understanding, a greater appreciation, a clearer picture of what it might take to, number one, apply, to number two, embark on the process, and to number three, be successful in the process such that you can pursue a productive career with a PhD behind your name. So with that, we've put together this session today, which we hope will be beneficial to all of you. One of the advantages of being at Indiana is that we've, number one, got a PhD program in entrepreneurship. Number two, we've got a very strong, diverse faculty group and a wonderful group of students. And so I've been able to tap into my faculty colleagues and the students at the school to be able to serve as a panel and to share with all of you what a PhD might look like and what it might take to be effective in doing this. So we've got with us 4 faculty members in addition to myself, plus 4 students. And the way we're going to work this is we're going to start off with a faculty panel in which I will be asking the faculty questions. And most of those questions have come from questions that you posed in the registration process. And I've sort of tried to order them and consolidate them so that they are giving you the information that you need. And then we will shift over in the second part of this to asking the students questions, slightly different angle, different perspective, and allow you to appreciate what it takes to do a PhD, to apply, to hopefully be successful in a PhD from a student's perspective. So all of the faculty who are on the call right now are professors in the entrepreneurship domain, and all of the students are currently students pursuing a PhD in entrepreneurship. Before we get into, I'm gonna in a moment ask each of the faculty and then students to just very briefly introduce themselves. But before we get into that, we do have questions or Q&A up, and we've got a chat up. If you've got a question that you actually want answered at some point during the call, then please put it on the Q&A. And if you look in the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A option there. If you're just wanting to say hi to people or comment on my nice attire or Trent's poor attire, then you can just put that in the chat, and I'm sort of going to ignore that. But that can just be ongoing. But if there's something specific that you want addressed by one of us, then please put it in the Q&A, and we will track that as a means to communicate. So thank you for being here. I'm going to start off by asking each of the faculty members to introduce themselves. And if you can just tell us very briefly each of you what your name is. It says at the bottom, but just to reiterate and get the pronunciations right, where you did your PhD. So where did you do your PhD program? What's your career steps been like since then? Where have you been, and how have you landed up at Indiana University? And then finally, what your research interests are. And Sophie, we're going to start with you because I'm going to sort of try and go in alphabetical order. So if you can fill us in on what's your road been like up till now, and what are your research interests?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Bach. I did my PhD at the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. I completed my PhD in 2012. I was a visiting scholar, a pre-doc, not a postdoc, at NYU Stern School of Business in New York City from 2010 to 2012. After graduating, I had a step in the United States, and I got a job as an assistant professor in social entrepreneurship at Northeastern University in Boston. And I joined IU last year in 2019 as an associate professor in entrepreneurship. And my area of interest is social entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Sophie. So next we're going to go to Jeff McMullen.
Hi, I'm Jeff McMullen. I got my PhD in 2003 at University of Colorado. I went to Baylor for 5 years after that, and then was recruited here to Indiana. I've been here since 2008. I'm the David H. Jacobs Professor, Chair Professor, full Professor of Entrepreneurship here at Kelley. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Journal of Business Venturing. And my, I guess my interest is all things entrepreneurship. I'm truly interested in all of it, not just one piece of it. I don't know if everybody can say that, but I know I can. So, yeah, so I have an affinity for social entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial cognition, entrepreneurial decision-making, policy stuff. I'm doing a special issue on that right now. So if it's on entrepreneurship, I'm interested.
Thanks, Jeff. And just to back up, Sophie, I don't know if she mentioned this, she's a field editor at the Journal of Business Venturing. And so we've got a number of people who are involved in certainly our top tier, or one of our top tier entrepreneurship journals here at Indiana University. Regan?
Thanks, Greg. So my name is Regan Stevenson. I did my PhD at the University of Central Florida. I graduated in 2016. And I was fortunate enough to have an offer to take at Indiana University as my first placement. So I've been here for about 5 years now. I study entrepreneur psychology, so more of a micro perspective on entrepreneur decision-making. And my favorite methodology to use is entrepreneurial experiments.
Thanks, Regan. Trent?
Yes, hi, I'm Trent Williams. I am a somewhat unique case in that I did my PhD here at Indiana University. I graduated 2014, spent a year here as a visiting professor, then went to Syracuse for 2 years, Syracuse University, and then was hired back. And so now I've been here for about 3.5 years, been back here, and just can't seem to get enough of it. I loved it as a student, so I kind of have that unique perspective on this panel, as I was a student and now I am a faculty member here. And I love the approach that we take. Obviously, I'm biased. Here I am back again, but to entrepreneurship research. My studies in particular focus on macro concepts of organizational emergence and the role of communities in the emergence of both new communities and organizations. But then also on the interaction between those kind of more macro concepts with micro features, such as resilience, individual cognitive resourcefulness, and so forth, as it relates to starting and maintaining new ventures. I also do a lot of my studies in what one might call more extreme contexts. Currently working on projects relating to refugee entrepreneurs, and not just people trying to subsist in refugee camps, but actually trying to launch, in their words, the Uber of Syria, and so on and so forth. And so I'm really interested in how people use entrepreneurship as a vehicle for personal transformation beyond just kind of the traditional venture capital backed firms. While all of that is interesting, as Jeff McMullen said, I've been particularly interested in how entrepreneurs in these resource constrained environments are launching and enabling ventures all over the world. So
thanks,
happy to be with you on the call today.
Thank you. So now we're going to go, I'm going to hand over to the students to briefly introduce themselves, and I want to switch this up slightly. So first we'll work our way backwards from most senior students, furthest along, to newest into the program. And what I would like you to do in introducing yourself is please tell us what you were doing prior to doing a PhD program. So because obviously everyone on the call is doing something different right now. What was the step to pursuing a PhD? And then finally, what year are you currently in, and what are your research interests? So Brian, if we can start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. So hello, everybody. My name is Brian Bergman. I'm a fifth year PhD student here at Indiana. Prior to joining Indiana, I was the assistant director of the Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Miami University, not in Florida, but over in Ohio, so just 2 hours that direction. Basically what I was doing there was all things related to teaching, research, and partnership engagement around social entrepreneurship. So it was kind of a unique role in that I sort of got to understand how academia works from sort of behind the scenes a bit. And that sort of is where I kind of caught the bug as it relates to doing academic research. So I got involved in some of those activities there. And then that sort of shifted me over to where I am now, which is here in Indiana. I primarily work with Jeff McMullen on the call. He's my advisor and dissertation chair, but Greg, Trent, and Sophie have all been involved in what I work on, and Regan's been a great sounding board too. So I'm definitely a product of a lot of people here right now. In terms of my research, I'm very much in the social entrepreneurship space, but I've also gotten more interested in entrepreneurial support organizations and ecosystems. So incubators, accelerators, those sorts of things, and how they do or don't help entrepreneurs start or continue their venturing. So that is pretty much me. So it's great to be with all of you, and happy to hear what you want to know.
Thank you, Brian. Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily. I am in my fourth year here, and I work with Greg Fisher and Don Karatko as my advisors. Prior to this PhD, I was doing management consulting. I had an advantage, kind of an inside view of what academia looked like because my dad is a professor. And so I was able to talk to different professors at his school about a PhD in entrepreneurship because it's not my dad's area, but through his friends, I kind of got an inside scoop and was told if I can get into IU, I should go to IU because this is the place to study entrepreneurship. And so that's kind of what led me here. And my research interests changed a lot during the program, but I'm currently interested in entrepreneurial action and entrepreneurial decision-making. So that's where entrepreneurial decision-making specifically is where my dissertation is.
Awesome, thank you. Next, I guess it's Devin.
Hey everyone, my name is Devin. I'm a third year PhD student at Indiana. So prior to getting into Indiana, I was getting my master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. There I actually met Regan Stevenson, who's also on the call right now. And he, gave me the bug of entrepreneurship and, really got me started on this path toward, learning about entrepreneurship more and more. So now I'm studying under Greg Fisher, and my primary research interests are entrepreneurial learning and entrepreneurial action.
Cool, thank you. And Joel?
Yeah, hi, Joel Adams. I'm a second year student here working with Jeff McMullen. Coming to this, this is a, third, fourth, something like that career for me. Came back a little late after doing an MBA and a master's in philosophy at the University of Louisville. I was doing education policy work. I started a few ventures of my own, ran some political campaigns, and I've been teaching for the last 8 years as well, just with the MBA in business schools. So all of that kind of culminated when my son graduated high school and allowed me to move somewhere. So that's what got me looking around and found IU, and it just seemed like the absolute best place to be studying entrepreneurship. Since being up here, interests have changed and they change constantly, but current interests certainly revolve around commitment and action as they relate to entrepreneurial opportunity, ethics and some policy considerations and plenty of other stuff. It's wonderful having these conversations that tend to go in 1,000 directions with everybody I talk to up here, and it always gets me excited about something new.
Awesome, thank you. So one of the things you'll pick up from the discussions here is that you don't need to come in knowing exactly what you're going to study. And in fact, in some sense, that can be a little constraining. Part of the journey is uncovering and trying to discover what is your passion, what is your interest, what is relevant to be studying relative to where the literature's at. And so a number of the students have spoken a little bit about how their ideas and perspectives have evolved, and that's built in and certainly part of the program. So what I'd like to start off with is if we can just discuss a little bit about what the structure of their PhD program looks like. And Jeff, you've probably had the most exposure to it and certainly have taught the most classes as part of the PhD program. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us the basic overview, basic structure, basic phases of what it entails and sort of timing of the PhD program.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, it's about a 5-year process. The first 2 years are coursework, and in those courses, you're taking 3 or 4 classes a semester, basically going from zero to almost no research skills. That's kind of the assumption that we operate on, up to a dissertation, you know, ready to kind of do your own original research at the end of those 2 years. So those first 2 years are a lot of classes, writing papers with professors, working with professors, writing papers on your own, getting advice and getting feedback from professors, working with fellow PhD students to kind of make sense of the field. And that concludes with your comprehensive exams, which are basically at the end of the 2 years. It's to give a sense of, do you understand the field? You know, what is that map for you? And you kind of build out a model of how you think all things are related in your area of expertise, and on also just some mastery of the methods, the state of the art and methods related to that topic. And so when that's done, assuming you pass, and most people do because they're prepared for it, we're hoping that everybody's successful. Our model here at Indiana is not one of attrition; it's one of success. So we bring you in with the full expectation that you're going to meet your potential and you're going to succeed. And so after you finish your comprehensive exams, you move into the dissertation phase. In that, you're working on a proposal. So you're working with an advisor, trying to figure out what your topic's going to be, what kind of questions you're going to ask. That can be a difficult period for a lot of people. It takes some time to figure out what you're going to study for the next 5 years, you know, probably. And once you've kind of decided that, you do a proposal that gets defended, and then you work on your dissertation with your advisor. So they're giving you some help, but a lot of that is independent study. That's something that you're doing on your own, that you're in charge of that research, that topic. And you're getting feedback from your advisor, but it's your project. You're pushing your research, and that goes on for about 2 years. And those 2 years, you're probably doing sometimes 3 studies. Sometimes people do a monograph. Sometimes they do 3 distinct papers, so that those are ready for publication. So that when they go into their first job at a top university, that they've already got a track record of publications happening. They've got a pipeline of research taking place and in development. And then that concludes with you defending your dissertation and taking a job at the dream university of your choice, or at least that's the hope. And so that's kind of the process. It's you interview about a year before you finish. So in about that 4th year, you're going on the job market in the summer to take a position after that 5th year is over. And so typically, you know where you're headed 6 months in advance, maybe even more, after graduation. And that's the process as it unfolds.
Cool, thank you. So 5 years is a long time. Trent, do you want to help us understand? You went through this, you had 3 onto 4 kids in the process. How do you afford it all? How do you make it all work from a financial standpoint, if you're having to pay for school and all of those other things? Just help us understand the sort of living situation and sort of affordability situation of doing a PhD, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we had our fourth child during my PhD, halfway through my second year, and you know, that's kind of motivating to get things done. And so my situation was slightly unique. I ended up graduating in 3 years, and so, but that really was a result of a lot of unique circumstances. So I affirm what Professor McMullen just said. You know, there's not a blitz to get out of the PhD program, and one of the reasons is it can be very difficult once you're out of the program to have access to resources that you have within the program to build up that research pipeline. And so, so there was a lot of scrambling and a lot of efforts on my part, along with other people who were supporting me to help build up that pipeline. But what I would say is, you know, as I considered PhD programs, one of the important factors for me was a place that I could focus, could afford to live with a small family, and try and get my studies done, as well as obviously the things we've been talking about with the fit, professional fit. Bloomington is a wonderful place to live. There are a lot of places to live for a lower cost. I was a management consultant before coming here, and I elected to live about 5 miles south of campus, which, depending on where you're from, you know, that's either a very, very, very short commute, which for me, moving from Dallas, Texas, where I normally commuted either an hour by car or several hours by plane every week, to a 5 mile commute was nothing. But for some of the undergraduate students here, they basically think that I live in Kentucky, which is about 90 miles south of here. So again, fantastic. I could ride my bike here, lots of schools, places for my children to thrive. And so one of the things that I did is I elected to negotiate with people renting a home, paid a bunch of money up front, and reduced my monthly expenses. So, you know, when I compared our location to other locations, it's kind of a no-brainer in terms of the cost of living. But I would say one of the biggest things that you will want to do as a doctoral student is create a structure for yourself that you can replicate when you're an assistant professor, because having routinized structure for yourself in being able to get your studies accomplished, initiate your research, you have a lot more freedom and free time and less structured time than a master's program. It's completely different type of a structure. And if you fail to impose some structure on your own self, then it's going to be a tricky thing to get through this. You know, we as faculty members are going to be supportive in helping you to build that structure, but we are not going to be providing, you know, daily follow-ups. You know, did you do your reading for today? I mean, this is not a master's or an undergraduate program. One of the things that I was frequently told, and that we continue to tell students, is the degree to which you engage, you know, we will match that effort. And if you want to do well, if you want to push hard, you want to explore, you want to be independent, we will be there to guide you as you embark on that journey. But anyway, to kind of summarize, yeah, this is a great place to have this kind of an experience, lower cost of living, but then also, even if you are in a stage where you have a family or other priorities, those priorities can actually help sharpen that focus and structure for you, as I found for myself.
Thanks, Trent. And one of the things to note, especially since we've got a lot of international people on the call, is the norm in the United States, at least at the sort of Research One business schools, is that if you get into a PhD program at almost all of the Research One business schools, you will, number one, get a tuition waiver. So you're not expected to be forking out the cost of your tuition every semester. That's built into the process. And number two, you will get some kind of stipend. Now, the stipends often vary, so you'll probably get more if you land up in Boston, because the cost of living in Boston is so much higher. But a stipend that will give you enough to live reasonably comfortably in that city or town from month to month as you go. And so at Indiana, it's somewhere around 20,000 per year. And that can allow you to rent an apartment and to sort of get by. reasonably comfortably. And in return for that, really the only thing we require is that you continue to make progress through the PhD program, and that you teach twice during that program. So it will typically be post your coursework. Prior to graduating, you will be required to teach for 2 semesters. And so it's just very, it was news to me. I was saving up money and trying to figure out how I was going to be able to afford to do a PhD until I discovered that in the US, the norm is that PhD programs are typically sponsored by the university. So I think it's worth knowing that. So the next question I want to ask is, what are some good reasons to pursue a PhD program? And Regan and Sophie, I'd like you to think a little bit about this. What should be a good reason, and then maybe the contrasting a bad reason to pursue a PhD program? Regan, let's start with you.
All right, so I'm going to start with a bad reason, because we do hear it sometimes, right? So a lot of people will sometimes think that a PhD program is really just a better version of an MBA, right? And so one of the reasons not to pursue a PhD is for, academic credentialing, so that you could advance your career as a manager or be a better entrepreneur, practicing entrepreneur. These are reasons not to pursue a PhD, because what we're going to teach you in the PhD program is really about how to undertake research in a systematic fashion. We're not going to train you to become the next great CEO. So let's just get that one out there first.
And a good reason, Sophie?
Yes. Well, I made a list. I have a lot of good reasons, and I had one bad reason. And the bad reason, I think, joins what Regan said. I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to do a PhD for the sake of doing a PhD. I value the fact that a PhD is a process. It's a journey that's very enriching at a personal level for many reasons. But to me, it helps to have some kind of a guiding star, knowing where I want to go. And it's been assumed in the conversation so far that a lot of the career goals that we shared as we did our PhDs was that we wanted to become professors, right? And some do that for other reasons and go in industry or work at the World Bank or other reasons like that. So a good reason, if you want to be a professor, that's probably the path towards it. Other good reasons, being passionate about a subject. I think if you have that in you, that you're a lifelong student and you have intellectual curiosity and you love reading, and you really want to give yourself the opportunity to reflect on a topic, go deep into the thinking, and just constantly ask questions. I think these are all good reasons for which to do a PhD, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that intellectual curiosity, that wanting to go deep on a particular question, that's got to be the biggest driver. And really, I just want to reiterate the point that our primary drive for you, if you do a PhD, is to become a business school professor, preferably a research professor that does some teaching but has a continued research career. That is quite different to what we often see across other parts of the world. I know in South Africa, a lot of people do PhDs because you can get good jobs in government if you do that. But we're not in the business of trying to help people do PhDs for those kinds of purposes. And I think you will find that at most US Research One business schools is that the desire of the professors there is to set you up as a successful professor and researcher going forward as the most relevant outcome to this process. So let's talk about what makes someone successful in the PhD program. And Jeff, you've seen a lot of people go through. What do you think defines an individual who's able to be pretty successful in doing a PhD program versus someone who sort of loses energy or gets lost or sort of isn't able to sustain good momentum or build up a sort of good portfolio of research and projects that they can build on after the program?
I mean, It's a great question. I think the number one thing is knowing that you're in charge. It's your venture. So think of it yourself like an entrepreneur, and you're building something. So what do you want to build, and how can you start figuring out what you need to do to build that out? So what capabilities do you need? So that's reading the literature. Like, what content do you need to understand or know? What conversations do you have to understand in order to do that? What methodologies do you need to learn? All of these things, what kind of people, what people in the field do you need to meet in order to make those connections to advance these projects that you're wanting to work on? And that is not something that you can passively wait for somebody to tell you. It comes from within. The people that are successful figure it out for themselves. Like, what do I care about? What do I want to achieve through this? And then they are the engine. What we are is we're there to help them figure. We're kind of helpfully kind of guide them or channel that energy in the right direction and help them figure out where those gaps are, how to overcome the obstacles. Everybody has different weaknesses, how to shore those up, how to overcome them. But one thing that we don't provide, we're not the jumpstart of the motivation. So you don't come in going, I don't know what I want to do. Please tell me. It's on you. Successful professors really figure that out for themselves. What makes them want to get up and do the research each day? Very much like starting your own venture in that regard. And so I think that's a big difference, because I think some people have difficulty making the shift from undergrad or from even MBA. Is very structured, tells you what to study. Here's what you need to do to be successful. It's very much a checklist. Do these things and you'll get accolades. That is not how being a professor, being a PhD student is. It is, these are tools, but you have to figure out what success means to you, what it is you would like to achieve, what you'd like to research, and then figure out how to use those tools creatively. So it's much more of a creative, autonomous project or process. I think that's what's exciting about it. There's enough routine that you can master it. You can learn what you need to know and you can feel comfortable, but there's a lot of novelty in it. And once you learn the process we teach and you learn in this process, it's not just entrepreneurship. You could research anything after this. I mean, you could, any social science topic, I could go out there and say, I want to learn about this, and I'd know how to do that. So we teach you for entrepreneurship, and we specialize in that way. But the tools and the capabilities you learn work for any kind of research topic that you might want to take on. And that's the process. Knowing that, owning that, feeling like you don't have enough time. You should always feel like you're behind, honestly. When I entered the program, I'd already studied for 2 years before I entered a PhD program. I felt like I was still 5 years behind because I know it takes a lot of time to publish these things. You have to feel a sense of urgency all the time, because if you don't, it won't happen. There's always something that gets in the way of creative work. So you have to feel like if you don't get up and do this, it's not going to get done. That has to be with you all the time. If it's not, then I don't know if this is the right career for you. I mean, this is a career that you have to own. It's like sales in that regard, that you have to deliver each day, or it's just not going to happen otherwise.
So there's lots of autonomy, and you really need the intrinsic motivation to drive and to continue to work hard and be sort of gritty in and amongst all that autonomy. If you're waiting for extrinsic rewards and milestones to clear, they're probably not going to be there.
Let me add though that we choose it though. So there's a very big difference here. I worked very hard. I was in accounting and auditing before this, and I worked very hard in accounting, but somebody else set the agenda of what I did and like what I needed to get done. And, you know, I'd maybe work those 70 hours and then we put the taxes or we put the financial statements, you know, they get filed away. These are your projects. So it's not the same thing. You're not forcing yourself to work. This is something you want to do. This is something you've chosen to invest in. And there's a big difference in that. So you do work hard, but that autonomy is king. I mean, nobody tells you what you have to study. If you've chosen something boring, it's on you. You've chosen poorly. So if your time is interesting, it's because you had enough courage to go after something interesting. And that's important. That's a big distinction, I think.
So one of the things we've had a few chat comments or Q&A comments about, and one of the things that we got a few comments or questions about in the registration process was different methodological approaches. and we've got people on the call who take different methodological approaches. Regan alluded to the fact that he primarily likes using experiments to study entrepreneurial phenomena and entrepreneurship related issues. Trent is very much a qualitative researcher. So I'd love to just explore those, and then the other any other methodological approaches that anyone else on the call thinks are particularly pertinent right now. So Regan, if you can just start off by talking to us a little bit about why you think experiments are valuable, and how the hell do you run experiments on entrepreneurial related issues?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So I enjoy running experiments because of the fact that you can control a lot of variables at play, right? So if you run field studies, one of the things you're always concerned about is there some unmeasured variable that's actually driving the cause and effect results that I'm observing in these data. In the experimental setting, what we do is we create simulations. We create decision context where we manipulate or switch primes or stimuli, so that if you're in group A, you would see on your computer screen certain decision variables. For example, if we were simulating the idea that you were going to do a crowdfunding investment, you would see a crowdfunding pitch, and you would see a set of stimuli. And then in situation B, we would change those stimuli. So in one condition, it would be a high version. Another condition would be a low version of whatever variable we wanted to test, right? So doing it that way, you get to be kind of the designer, similar to what Jeff was talking about. You can kind of develop your own entrepreneurial way of going about the research. So that to me is what I find fascinating. I also really value the opportunity that we have here, where I can pursue this methodological form, and I might be able to combine it with, say, qualitative research, something that Trent does or that Greg does, Sophie as well, and many others, or a larger field study, something like Matthew Josephy would do here as well. So the opportunity to try different methodologies and have mixed methodologies in the same paper is really important as well.
Trent, what about, so you're obviously much more qualitatively orientated as opposed to experimental. Can you help us understand why you think what qualitative entails, how it's different from what we might have heard with experiments or other research methodologies, and why you feel that's valuable?
Yes, I think as you would learn in our research methods class, we have different types of methodologies to address different kinds of questions. And so if I'm trying to answer a question that is exploring generalizability, I would not use a qualitative approach, because I'm studying a smaller sample. So what would be the point of studying a smaller sample? Because we don't just go and talk to 3 people and write it up. That's not a qualitative study. That's maybe somewhat bad journalism. But rather, there's a rigorous process of trying to understand questions about how and why. So how and why do people behave in certain ways? How and why are individuals able to access different kinds of resources? How and why are people launching ventures despite being a refugee seeking asylum in another country, and so on and so forth? And really, it's difficult to get to those kinds of questions through survey measures and even experiments, although Regan might challenge me with that. But the point is, you're using other techniques such as in-depth interviews with many people, over 60 people usually, and then you have follow-up interviews, and then you're gathering this data over time, and you're also triangulating that data with secondary resources like news articles and so on and so forth, and you're also triangulating that with observation data. And so we're going into local areas, or we're going into the context that we're trying to explore, and we're trying to understand what it is that we are seeing, and how and why does that shape theory. And so it really becomes a matter of what it is that you are trying to actually understand and explore. And so, yes, a number of the rest of you asked, well, is the program more qualitative or quantitative? And I answered that in the chat, saying, look, we're going to give you the tools you need to be able to do both, but primarily we anchor you in, quantitative really is anything where we're dealing with data, to be honest. And so qualitative research is still dealing with data, but it's using it to answer different types of questions. And so we would be interacting with you on those fronts and trying to help you understand, okay, given the questions that you're exploring, these might be useful tools and methodologies to follow in order to address those. So some of you might be saying, okay, well, gosh, lots of interviews, as well as follow-up interviews and over time, and man, are we talking about a 700-year PhD program? And the answer to that is no. You know, I completed my PhD program and came out of the PhD with 3 qualitative studies published. And so it is possible to do qualitative work quickly, and you just have to be very effective with your time. And you know, that might be talking to your supervisor, something that I think is somewhat unique at Indiana. When you come in, you will have mentors from day one. You can shift with your mentors over time, but you're not just going to be wandering around the hallways with your hat in your hands, begging for help. You will have somebody that will specifically be mentoring you and helping to guide you and saying, oh, if you're interested in these things, and if you want to hit the timelines that we have laid out, that we are all on board with, because obviously you want to graduate with your PhD, then you really need to start thinking about collecting data right now. And that might be survey data, it might be qualitative data. So really that's kind of a lot of different elements to this question of why qualitative and when would qualitative be useful. But this is where kind of the mentorship model that we have here at Indiana is quite unique compared to many other programs.
That said, you're not going to come in and be given a project from day one that you're going to work under someone else or in someone else's lab. You need to come in and begin to configure and work out what the projects are that you want to create. And I think that's important because in certain science-related subjects, you often come in and you just plugged into or science-related PhDs, you just plugged into a lab, into a set of projects and told to go and do a certain number of things, and your name lands up on a paper as a result of that. In management PhD programs, that's typically not the case, and it's certainly not the case here. So we've heard a little bit about experiments and qualitative research. Sophie, what other options do you have in terms of publishing papers, writing work, and where do you sort of fall? What kind of work do you like to do?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for all the great questions. You know, to draw a parallel with what Jeff McMullen said earlier, everything social entrepreneurship interests me. And so I've conducted research on a variety of topics within the social entrepreneurship area across different levels of analysis. So at the individual level, I've looked at the drivers of what will prompt individuals to start a social entrepreneurial venture and to reach some kind of generalizability, which Trent addressed earlier. We conducted a large-scale survey study and used quantitative analysis to test some hypotheses that we had drawn from our knowledge and review of the literature. So this is one project. But in other projects, at the organizational level, I've been studying for a number of years a large cooperative bank that is trying to maintain its mission to be social in the services that it gives to community members, in particular farmers, and that bank is in France. And with that, we've been looking at the how question that Trent addressed earlier, which is how can that bank over many decades sustain that mission while it went through a merger and acquisition and acquired another financial bank. And that how question could be addressed through a qualitative study, and I won't repeat what Trent said, a qualitative study based on one case that was an extreme case of a large bank that was social from the beginning, but went through a shock of incorporating a more traditional financial banks. So my areas of interest are across levels of analysis and across methodologies.
So one of the questions we've had in the chat is, what's the difference, and Jeff, I'd like you to try and take this one at least initially. What's the difference between doing a PhD in entrepreneurship and a PhD in strategy or organizational theory, and maybe using entrepreneurial type settings as your research setting or as your context? Is there a difference? Could that be in the same program? And how would one sort of think about maybe trying to be more centrally entrepreneurially orientated versus saying, I want to do a PhD in strategy and I might do a little bit of entrepreneurship context stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's a difficult question because our fields do blend. I mean, that said, there's overlap across these different spaces. And for instance, I started out in strategic management and then came into entrepreneurship because there was no entrepreneurship PhD at that time. So what's the difference? I'd say there's a few things. One is level of analysis. A lot of times when you look at for example, strategic management or org theory, they're typically at the level of the organization or the firm, and mostly there, almost never another level. And I'd say at entrepreneurship, it's very hard to study entrepreneurship just from the firm or the company level. You also have to study it from the individual level, which is usually the domain of an area called organizational behavior, which studies a lot of the psychology of individuals. Entrepreneurship's a weird amalgamation where it's kind of meso level. You start with individuals and they build or create firms. So they start at the individual level and end at the organizational level. And even when it's happening within an organization, it's still individuals that kind of bring things together and then work as a team to make it an organizational phenomenon. So it's a transitional kind of field. And I think that's distinctive and unique enough that it makes it extremely difficult to study it right at the heart of the entrepreneurial process if you are in strategy or in organizational behavior. So those two fields get at it. They can overlap at the very edges, but they don't get the meat of what it is that we like to study, which is really kind of the process. It's this kind of this creation of value or creation of wealth. And I think that's distinctive. There's some other things. I personally was drawn more to entrepreneurship than the other fields because I felt like the questions were still wide open. I could ask a lot more questions. It's still a very emerging, nascent area compared to strategy's been around longer, or theory's been around longer, organizational behavior. And because of that, certain questions are okay and other questions are not so okay. Like they've been endorsed or validated by gatekeepers in some of the more mature disciplines. In entrepreneurship, it's still pretty wide open. If you're interested in it and you can convince a few other people it's interesting, then it happens. Then it gets published. The field is still fairly open. As the editor of one of our top journals, I make sure if there is a community that isn't represented, that we have a representative. I don't know if every editor goes about that, but that's still the inclusivity and the ethos of the field is very much, we want new ideas, we want new entrants. And that's just a different attitude, I'd say, than perhaps you would get in other communities. Now, that said, I think it's important to realize that your work will overlap other areas. So it's important to think about, this is what I'm interested in, but why would other people be interested in it as well? Why might people in strategic management or org theory or organizational behavior find what I've just found interesting? And if you can do that, then you can have both. You can really focus in, be an entrepreneurship scholar who has impact that reaches beyond that. And I think that's what we try to promote here at Indiana. If you look at all our professors, how they publish some in entrepreneurship, they publish some in management, and wider, you see even some sociology, economics, and psychology journals as well. So that's our orientation. And I think it's liberating in the sense that you can specialize and not always have to pretend to be something else. I don't have to be something and then pretend to be interested in entrepreneurship. It's hard to do that and succeed. So I like the fact that we can truly be 100% focused on the topic that we're interested in.
Awesome. So we're going to shift to asking the students a few questions now. And just off the back of what Jeff's just said, I just want to reiterate that or articulate that in the program, what you do in the first 2 years of your coursework entails attending seminars. Seminars are typically like small classes in which you do a whole lot of reading beforehand, and then in the class you discuss the nuances and intricacies of that reading, unpack what you need to know from that. And those seminars are typically stretch across these different topic areas. So you're not only doing seminars that are purely focused on entrepreneurship related topics. I teach a seminar that is strategic management and entrepreneurship. And so we're covering an array of topics across all of those. We do have one that is the theoretical foundations of entrepreneurship, but then our PhD students will also do seminars that might be related to teams and OB, like Emily's done, or related to psychology, like Devin's done. So you are exposing yourself to lots of different perspectives and lenses through which to try and understand the world before you double down on, okay, this is the lens I'm going to use. And very often you're going to be using a particular sort of disciplinary lens to shed new light on entrepreneurial phenomena if you're going to pursue a PhD in entrepreneurship. And so our entrepreneurship students interact very extensively and heavily with our strategy students and with our OB students. And there's actually, once you get into the program, not a very clear demarcation between each, and you will find yourself sort of bricolaging or collecting pieces and ideas and concepts from each of those and creating your own research identity and profile out of that. So let's shift over to the students now, and just Brian, if you can start off just by talking to us a little bit about how for you the cadence of the program has changed as you've progressed from first to second year, second to third, third to fourth, and now in your fifth year of the program.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the best way that I thought about this, the best way I could sort of think about this question is really just sort of this shift over time from sort of just consuming information to actually like challenging, questioning, and generating information over time. So, you know, just sort of standing in front of the fire hose and just being blasted with information for the better part of 2 or 3 years. And then finally sort of coming around to, oh, like I actually have some thoughts about this that aren't quite what I'm reading, or, oh, I totally disagree with everything that anyone's ever said on this because of my life experiences or whatever. So it's really just kind of that focus shift over time in a large sense, or sort of in a philosophical sense, is one from just consuming to engaging and generating new information. In terms of sort of the ebb and flow of it, I think Trent nailed it in terms of the word structure and just sort of finding discipline in different competing demands. So, you know, when you come in, it's balancing coursework and trying to figure out what the heck research is and how you might be able to do it, to then you're teaching and you're doing research, to then you're all alone by yourself with mountains of books and papers, trying to find that new level of discipline, which is how to keep moving the bar on stuff and how to keep tabs on all these different things that are moving. Oh, and you're a social being, so maybe a family or friends, if you have those, that you kind of have to balance as well. So, you know, in many ways, I don't think the focus and the cadence, like the cadence doesn't change, the focus changes slightly, but I think the hurdles continue to just go up and up and up, and you're ready for it each time because the faculty have given you the tools to be successful and to get across that next hurdle. But, you know, first it's, let's survive the first semester, then it's survive the first year, then it's survive comps, then it's survive, you know, it's just constantly moving, tick, 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 up, 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 up. But, you know, I speak on behalf of all of us when, you know, I say the faculty gives us the tools to be ready for that next hurdle. Because we've passed the ones before. And so I think that, yeah, I think those are the main things for me, is just trying to find that discipline and acknowledging that, you know, all the rest sort of just stays the same. The bar just kind of goes up a little bit more and more.
Cool. Thank you. Emily, let's shift over to you. And I want to ask, what have you, so you're now in the fourth year of the program, you've made good progress, but if you were to start again, what would you do differently? Aside from choosing a different advisor, you're not allowed to say that now, but anything else that you might do differently in retrospect, or feel like if you were starting again, you would give yourself a head start by doing X, Y, or Z? Anything come to mind?
Sure. Yeah, so I don't think there was anything that I would have done differently before I started the PhD program, but during my first 2 years, I would have probably made a few adjustments. So I think I would have taken more methods classes, tried to take some more quantitative methods to increase those skills during coursework.
So help us understand a little bit there. What does the choice of options look like? Aren't you just specified that you must take this class, this class, this class, and this class? Where do you get the option to take extra classes?
Yeah, so we are required to take 2 statistics classes, one offered by Chris Berry in our department. That might change in the future, I don't know, but another statistics class that we take in marketing. But then we have a basic research methods class. And then on top of that, you're required currently to take an additional methods class or some stats class. But I think in the future, that's going to actually be increased to 12 credit hours. So you're going to have to take an additional methods class, but you also have a minor that you can fill with extra classes. And I think some people have done a customized like methods minor or psychological methods. And I think that's really valuable. There were a couple of classes that I took as part of my minor that were valuable, but looking back, I feel like I could have even had more value if I had done more methods focus.
So that might mean going to one of the other schools on campus and finding a methods class. I know Brian did that, and so on. And so is that what you mean?
Yeah. So you can look at all the methods and stats classes being offered around campus, also offered by different departments. I took a methods class from a finance instructor here, and so you can take classes outside. I think Devin did psychological methods and took a lot in psychology. So you can look elsewhere. And I think my first year, I wasn't looking as much outside of the business school as I kind of wish I would have. I was just trying to survive. And so I would just encourage people to kind of investigate a little bit more what's out there, because you also, with doctoral seminars, sometimes they're only offered once every 2 years. And so you kind of need to plan from the beginning, work with your advisor, kind of look ahead what class you might want to take to try to get that in your schedule and your course plan. Another thing that I wish I would have done, so I came in, the main seminar for entrepreneurship was my very first semester when I just felt very overwhelmed. And was just trying to survive. Like Brian said, the first semester, just trying to survive. But I wish that I had taken better notes as I was going through the seminar papers, because when it came to the comps, I just reread everything and kind of just started from scratch on some notes. And so I wish I had kind of had comps in mind from the very beginning, especially in that core seminar. So when you look at qualifying exams and what could potentially be on that, try to as you're going through those seminars, take good notes, start brainstorming research questions so that you can use that when you're going through qualifying exams. But otherwise you start over like I did.
Thank you. So Devin, I'm going to ask you the next one. What would you recommend people look for in a program? You obviously looked around, you had different choices, you've now experienced a program. And, we've got lots of people on the call. They're going to look at lots of different PhD programs. What as a student in the program is meaningful or valuable for you? And if you were advising a friend or a sibling or a cousin looking at PhD programs, what would you recommend they look for?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So before I even jump into that, I just want to second what Emily said about collecting notes through your seminars, and just keep it in a single document, because that is incredibly useful advice. I would definitely recommend doing that. That's something that I learned through the process too. But as far as picking a program, I would say you kind of have to balance like both cognitive and emotional sort of factors there. So I would say maybe 3 factors I would look for. The first is quality of the scholarship that comes out of the program. That's incredibly important, to surround yourself with people from Indiana who are incredibly productive, and they just produce really high quality and high impactful research. The second I would say is culture. And this is kind of more of the emotional sort of side of things. It's more like, is it a supportive program, or are they all kind of standoffish? So Indiana is really supportive. There's a strong sense of community in both, not just from the faculty side, but also from the doctoral student side. We all, get along well, really well together. And then I would say the third is your fit with your, with not only the program, but also with your advisor in terms of both, your research interests, but also who you are as people. Like, do you fit in terms of a personality match? And so it's really useful to talk with people about, what is the quality of the scholarship? You can find rankings online of, different management programs, but also talking to people about what's it like being at Indiana University or whatever program, you're deciding. And then, set up a call with your, the potential advisor and see if you kind of feel like there's a match there or not. And like try to do a little digging about, what you find interesting personally. And yeah, really try to find that match.
Awesome. Thank you.
Greg, can I add a couple things?
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay, so I echo what Devin said, but a couple other things that I looked at when I was choosing a PhD program was the success rate of students when they come into the program. What percentage of them are successful and actually complete the program? Because there are some schools that bring in a lot of PhD students and then only the strong survive. And so I knew that the PhD program was going to be challenging and I wanted to be set up for success, not trying to go against people to survive and complete it. And so I would look at programs that are maybe a little bit more selective and bring in a smaller amount of students, but then really support them through the program. And then also, I would look at the placement of the students, the past students, because that if you have some schools in mind that you'd like to end up at, it's a good indicator, the schools that prior students have been placed at, where you could potentially land. So if you want to go to Harvard, at the end, if you want to be a professor at Harvard, you probably need to get your PhD at an Ivy League as well. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get that, but they just do different types of research too. So for me, I was looking at placement. There are a lot of universities that I would be interested in working at near home at the end. And so I wanted to go to a school that could help me get there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit more to that too, because I think this is a really important question. It's one that's pretty fresh in my mind too, having just done this last year. But one other factor, and I agree with everything that just got said, but one other factor too is the depth of the bench. And this is one of the things that was really attractive about Indiana is you've got people that do all these different methods and all these different content areas, broad interests, narrow interests, and everything in between. And I think that that makes a huge difference, because there were other schools that I looked at and talked to, and that was a major factor in the end. Was if I go here, I've got two people that I could potentially work with on anything related to entrepreneurship, and this is what they do, and that may be what I'm even interested now, but I don't know that it's going to be. And I think not having the ability to get exposed to all these different areas and ways of looking at these problems, can be a big challenge too. So definitely the depth of bench is a major factor to my mind. And then just to add on to what Devin said regarding, kind of the cultural piece, maybe in that preliminary sense, and this actually factors in, I think, what Emily was saying too. So when I was reaching out and trying to reach out to different faculty members that seemed aligned with me, there was a big difference in different schools. There were some schools that literally said, we don't allow applicants to talk to faculty members. Just apply and see how it goes. And then other schools, you could actually talk to somebody, but it was a standoff thing. So you almost get a feel for some of that right up front. And here it was very, very open, very welcoming. And I'd had several conversations with faculty members before I even applied. And so that made a big difference too.
Thanks, Joel. And so the follow-up question to that, and I was going to throw it to you first, seeing that you are freshest off the boat, is what are some of the skills you feel like you may need coming into the program? Is there anything specific that you would do even before you came into the program, or can you come in completely fresh and be fine?
So I was a lot of years since doing anything related to statistics in my brain. And I definitely wish I had even refreshed a bit more. I did some, but I still wish I had refreshed some of that kind of stuff a bit more. I think, you know, coming from a different areas or from an MBA or somewhere that's much more practitioner oriented, getting a better sense of, you know, what really was going on and what is qualitative versus quantitative research. What does that really mean? There were some great recommendations made to me about some books to take a look at, you know, at the front end before, you know, as I was in the application process. Cresswell's book on research methods, and I forget her name all of a sudden. The Huff book on, you know, scholarship as well. Those two really helped kind of frame things for me at the front end and start thinking about what I might be rethinking when I walked through the door. So that was definitely a shift as time went on.
Excellent. Any other comments on things you might do even before starting the program that would be helpful in addition to what Joel said from any of the other students? Devin, I see you've unmuted.
Greg, I think, I don't know if it's a skill, Regan might be able to help me out with this, but I would encourage everyone to, I guess, brush up on and practice coachability and just being able to be open to feedback and sort of parking your ego. And, you know, being extremely curious about things and seeking feedback from others. I think that's an incredibly important skill, and I think it's helped me through the program.
Any comments on that, Regan?
Yeah, it definitely helps. I mean, so my background before starting my program is I was an entrepreneur for close to 10 years. And I was in a position where, you know, I was calling the shots and you know, picked out the offices that we were in. And one of the things that is really different when you come back and get your PhD is you're kind of starting from square one again. For some people, that could be too much. That might be intimidating. But if you have enough humility to realize that, you may know a lot about entrepreneurship, you may know a lot about your business, but it's all personal experience. It's all anecdote. And what we're really trying to do is get you new skills that are related to being a great researcher. You kind of got to start from the bottom again. And if you go in with that mindset, the coachable mindset that Devin mentioned, I think by the time you get on the other end of the 5 years, that's when you can start to draw on your previous entrepreneurial experience. That's when it becomes really valuable. So you have to put it aside for a little while and say, I need to learn new methods. I need to learn statistics. I need to learn the process of being a researcher. And then once you're at the point where you're generating your own research questions and you're really pursuing your own research agenda, then you can tap back into your deep knowledge of the phenomenon and let that motivate some of your research. So I think that's an important point. It's not just continuation of your MBA. It's not a continuation of your life as an entrepreneur. It's really a new career, a new way of seeing the world.
And the one thing we can all attest to is that in this career, whether you're a student or whether you've graduated and are now a professor, is you do get a lot of rejections. So, getting a paper accepted into a journal often necessitates that you get a lot of rejections prior to that ever being accepted. You get a lot of quite negative feedback on some of your early work. You might be presenting at a conference or even just chatting to your advisor, and they tell you that's been done, or that's not the way to think about it, or that question's just not relevant. So you need to be open and humble enough to receive negative feedback, and getting your mindset right for that prior to coming into the program and saying, I'm going to have a growth mindset. I'm going to be open to learning. I'm going to be embracing of all the feedback that comes my way. And for some people, as Regan mentioned, especially if you're like Joel or myself or Jeff, you come to this career a little later in life. You've often been in a managerial position or in some position of sort of power, and now you're stepping to the lower rung on the ladder. You've got to be open to being taught and to being coachable and to learning coming into the program. So I think getting your mindset right for that can make a big difference. What about
Greg,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add stuff as far as like things coming in and stuff to not pay attention to or to pay attention to, because it connects to some of the writing and reading issue here. So the one thing that has to be really clear here is the unbelievable amounts of reading and writing that you're going to do. So if you hate writing, do not do a PhD. Like, it's not really going to be very fun for you. So, you know, and in terms of parking our ego and stuff like that, being open to the fact that how you were taught to write is probably not that great, and that you need to get better at it over time. It's just something that you have to be open to and aware of. And in terms of just like stuff to do before arriving, just two tidbits. One is to like find your sources of inspiration. And I don't mean like in books. I mean podcasts or radio shows or websites and blogs. Find a way to build a rhythm in your life that sort of infuses you with new and different ideas, because we're in the business of ideas and creating knowledge. And the more that you sort of get, the better. And the other thing I'll say, I had this conversation, I think with Devin, I'm pretty sure with Joel. They both asked me like, can you send me articles to read before I start the program? And I said, no, I can't. And they were like, but that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm like, you will read so many articles later that you don't need to read them now. And not only that, but like the reason I say that is I remember reading articles in my job before I came here. And I didn't have the sort of scaffolding in my brain yet to actually remember them correctly and understand what was happening. And so I would actually go back and reread some of these papers and be like, oh, I completely misunderstood that, because I didn't have the chops yet to really engage in a paper on institutional theory yet, or some other really like org ecology, or some really sort of deeper abstract ideas that we're just never exposed to. So, you know, there's a temptation to say, I'm going to do a PhD. Let me dive into these, you know, these journal articles and stuff. I mean, do that, but do that with caution, because you tend to remember papers the first time you read them in a certain way that you almost have to unlearn or maybe question later on. But yeah, find and build that rhythm of creating new and interesting ideas that are flowing through your head that are popular press books or podcasts or radio or whatever, because that really is going to help you a lot in terms of generating new and interesting ideas, conversations that are relevant and timely to entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, whoever. That seems to me to be the most important thing, because finding inspiration and new ideas is hard to do. And so the more you can kind of sort of spark that, the better.
Yeah, and as professors and people within the business school, we're not always aware of all of those things. We're not always at the cutting edge of the cultural zeitgeist. So that's almost a unique differentiating attribute that you can bring to the process if you've tapped into some fascinating podcaster who just sees the world in a different light and causes us to think about things in a different way. So I really think that's valuable. You know, whether it's TED Talks, podcasts, there's so much interesting knowledge and information being generated out there. They're trying to be on top of that. So one of the things that I had on my list, and it's now come up in the Q&A, and Brian, you're going to be best positioned to talk about this, is just the whole notion of the job market. Obviously, the market is in a state of somewhat of stagnation or disarray as a result of COVID. Many universities having frozen their hiring process. You're obviously a pretty strong candidate, but you've hit probably the worst job market we've had in I don't know how long. So can you talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing out there, and do you have any views on what it might look like going forward? And then anyone else can chime in and talk a little bit about job market, job placements, job prospects underneath the conditions that we're currently in.
Sure. So I think I answered this in one of the chats that came up. I mean, the big difference so far, so our Jeff kind of laid out the flow of the program at the start here. Usually a lot of our jobs go up in the early to mid-summer. And so we know by August sort of generally what the bulk of hiring is going to look like going into the fall. This year, there were about 7 jobs posted in August as compared to over 100 last year. And so the sheer volume of jobs available is definitely down. It started to improve over the last couple months. In September and October, more jobs have been posted, but a lot of them are international, which is difficult, obviously, right now in terms of the back and forth between country borders and things like that. So it's hard to even kind of think about those sorts of options. In terms of the conversations and things that I've had and that I've seen, there's a lot of variance in terms of why schools are or aren't hiring. So some schools have hiring freezes in place, and they don't know what that means or when it would be lifted necessarily, because it's just a preventative measure, not necessarily a punitive one, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, things are just sort of really scattered out as opposed to being tightly packed together like it typically is in the summer and then again in the early spring. From the conversations I've had with a couple of different schools, though, it sounds like schools are sort of starting to figure out what they can and can't do going into next year. I would expect it to be kind of improving over time, but as a job market candidate, it's very difficult because we switch in and out of doing, you know, our research and what we're doing each day, and then trying to be in job market mode and filling out applications and watching the job boards. And so it's a much harder year in terms of that sort of switching back and forth. I don't know what to anticipate going forward, in the sense that obviously we're going to have a whole nother cohort of people that are going to be on the market next year. What I do know is that this is why you want to go to a strong school, right? You want to go to a place that's going to have the network, that's going to have the reputation, and is going to give you the outputs that matter on the job market, right? And so that's the thing that I can only kind of continue to lean on, aside from just focusing on the process, is to say, okay, this is why you want to go to a strong school that really does all the things we've been talking about around culture, around productivity, around support, around networking, right? So, I mean, this is really when that sort of leverages itself in ways that it typically wouldn't matter as much, maybe. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But there's still quite a few postings out there, and so we'll see what happens over time. But yeah, it's been a difficult year.
One thing I will say, it's certainly been a year that's off the charts difficult in terms of small number of job postings, with, you know, a similar amount of people wanting to try and get those jobs. But this career or this business schools do go in cycles. So if there are few jobs being offered this year, invariably, whether it's next year or the year down the line, we've got to teach, have the capacity to teach and have the capacity to fill enough positions to be able to fulfill all our requirements on the demand side. And so if there is a few jobs now, invariably down the line, there's going to be a very good job market. Now, for the people on the call right now, that could be, 5 years down the line, it could be an exploding job market as a result of the job freezes that have happened in the pandemic. So theoretically, if you think of the cyclical process, if you start a PhD next year, could be going into one of the strongest job markets we've ever seen in business schools, assuming business schools continue to operate in a similar sort of way.
Yeah,
so
can I add to that? I just want to add really briefly. I mean, this isn't as mysterious as we're making it sound, too, because you can look at demographics. So most business schools were started in the 60s and 70s, and that means that a lot of those positions were filled with tenure track people. They were tenured, they were baby boomers, and the very beginning of the baby boom retirement has already started. It started about 5 years ago, and it's going to continue for another 5 years. Well, that means those positions have to be replenished, and there's not been a supply as big as there was in the 60s and 70s of professors. So there's not been a huge labor pool. So that means that there are a lot of jobs. On average, there are way more jobs than there are candidates for those jobs. So when we're talking about jobs here, we're talking about jobs at the very elite top schools. We're not talking about all the jobs out there. There are a lot of positions. So it is a very good time to get an entrepreneurship or a management PhD. This is not English and the humanities. This is very different. There are jobs. The business schools are growing on most campuses, and they have to fill those positions to teach. And you're coming out of a program here where people look and say, do you have any candidates? I get asked that regularly. So I'm not out there having to go, hey, I've got a guy. Many times people are saying, do you have any students coming out this year? Because they know that people are well trained when they're coming from Indiana. So this is important to pay attention to, because it means that there are jobs. We're not talking about poverty and homelessness here. I thought about getting a PhD in English, and then I realized I like money and I didn't want to be poor. So I'm telling you, I did the research. This is a good field to be in. This is one of those rare perfect storms where there are very few candidates, lots of jobs, and it pays well. So on the material side of the house, beyond the intrinsic, just it's fun to do the job, materially speaking, it's a pretty good career. I mean, I've worked for a living. This is not working for a living. This is a much, much better career path than going to the mill and putting in your time. So I think that's important to realize that it is a privilege to be here. It is a privilege to do this, and the future is bright. It's just because COVID has put a dampening lens for this last year. We're talking 5 years down the road from now, and it does not. The apocalypse is not on the horizon. It's looking really, really good in terms of being a professor. I would want to be starting right now. Let's put it that way. So I just want to share that with people because I think there's too much pessimism out there. It's just not true. If you look at the facts are really good. Things look bright moving forward.
Yeah, and we know as a school that's been hiring people over the last few years, and even under the conditions, we're hiring someone in organizational behavior this coming year, a tenure track person, that it's tough to find good people. So if you go and you do a PhD at a good program and you put in the work, there's great prospects. So final question I've got, and this is for the students. Do you have a lot of extra time on your hands for other activities? Would you recommend trying to do this part-time? This came up quite a lot in the questions. Or could you try and sort of do it from a distance, do it remotely? And we're talking now in particular a PhD program at a Research One university that is essentially labeled as a full-time program. Is it feasible to think about doing this part-time in any way? Emily, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, this is full-time, so no, you should not do part-time. This, I guess, I don't remember who said it, but yeah, you're going to get as much out of it as you put into it. So if you're only giving part of your time, then you're not going to see the productivity. You're not going to get the publications. Maybe you won't finish the program. So you need to devote your time to this. Now, I am someone that needs some balance in my life. So I still have some outside activities that I do. I know Brian also is in a Thursday night run group. I have activities with my church, but those aren't a part-time job. And so this is a full-time job. You're getting paid, you're getting a stipend. So you need to devote yourself to it, but you're not going to have absolutely zero time for a hobby that you enjoy doing. I think it's important for your mental health to make sure that you still go on those walks. You still try to make friends during this program. We have socials just within the PhD program where we're hanging out with other PhD students in our department and outside our department. Joel's really good at having us at his backyard for barbecues or cookouts. And so I think it's important to have those activities, but you need to devote yourself, and this is a full-time program.
Yeah, I would strongly encourage you to keep other interests and activities alive. I think just, you can become very absorbed in the work of the PhD program, and it can become all-encompassing. And I personally don't think that's healthy. I continued to do a whole lot of endurance type activities while I was doing my PhD program, and I think that kept me sane and it kept me healthy. So, but I would not encourage you to try and keep another job going while you're doing this. There will be opportunities to teach, and there'll often be opportunities to do other little things, but trying to keep a full-time job going while doing a PhD program at a school like Indiana University would be really tough. Okay, so one of the things that we've had a question about, or a few questions about, are sort of cultural and ethnic diversity. It's no secret that we're all white faces, all fairly strong English speakers, even Sophie with her wonderful accent and my beautiful accent. And the one thing I will start off by saying, and then allow anyone else to chip in, is giving underrepresented minorities a chance at PhD programs, creating opportunities is a priority of the Kelley School of Business, and I think it's a strong priority across the academy. And so in essence, if you are coming from an underrepresented background, I think you start with something of an advantage in terms of putting in applications, and I think you should attempt to leverage that. You still need a reasonably good GRE or GMAT score. You still need to be able to show that you meet the application criteria, but I think you will certainly get a good look, a good opportunity. And to be frank, we desperately want more people of different ethnicities and different races within our business schools, whether it's as a PhD student or as a professor. So I think you get a really big advantage in terms of getting access to programs and then getting jobs out of programs if you are coming at this from a different racial or ethnic background. And so I don't want to hide behind the fact or run away from the fact that, hey, we're all white English speaking people on the call right now. And to some extent, it's not a perfect representation, but there is an underrepresentation of minorities and people of different ethnicities in our field and in the academy more broadly. And so I think there is a strong incentive on the part of deans and on the part of department chairs to try and do whatever they can to mitigate that and to create opportunities for people of different ethnicities and different racial backgrounds. So if that was your question that you asked, or if that's something that you're thinking or you've noticed on this call, you're 100% right, and I think you can use it in your advantage. So I didn't want to run away from that issue because I think it's evident here. Okay, so we're at 57 now. I want to be conscious of our time. I just want to firstly thank Sophie, Trent, and all the others who've been answering all of the questions on the Q&A. What I will do is make a copy of both what's been in the chat and in the Q&A, and I'll be emailing that out to everyone who's been part of the call. But just as a final wrap up, I just want to go around and ask everyone to say any final comments, any final words of encouragement, any final thoughts as you all consider a PhD in entrepreneurship. So we'll start with the faculty. We'll start with Jeff, and we'll work our way through the faculty, and then the students, and then I'll just finally wrap things up. Jeff, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say we welcome you. I mean, whether you come to Indiana or not, I mean, I prefer you come here. But if you don't come here, I just want to see you as part of our community. So, and I don't care, gender, ethnicity, any of that. That's irrelevant. I mean, do you have interesting ideas? Are you excited about the topic? That's what drew me to entrepreneurship, is that a big tent. People that came with all different interests and orientations, and they just wanted to talk about something together, and they were excited about it. And if you're excited about that and you want to share ideas or explore new ideas, we want you to be part of our community. It's just that simple. So, I mean, I'd love to see you join us here, but if not here, just join the community and we'll run it. We'll work together. I work with people from all different universities as does everybody here. So it's not, you don't have to be at Indiana to be part of our community. And that's all I'd want to share.
Thanks, Jeff. Trent?
Yeah, I think some of the questions we've received have been, am I a perfect fit in this way? Do I have a gap in this way? Do I have my GMAT? Is it 17 points too low? Is it this and it's that? And I will say that what Jeff just said is accurate. We are a broader community, which as you move forward, you realize that it's much smaller than it seems on its face. Initially you think, well, gosh, there are universities all over the world. Are these people connected at all? And the answer is yes, very much connected. And so look forward to interacting with you moving forward. But also, don't be worried that you don't have the quote unquote perfect background. I think one of the things hopefully you all picked up on from hearing from the different panelists here is we've all come to this career from different routes and different pathways. And then our evolution as scholars continues to occur. You have people who did certain things in their PhD, and then they've evolved away from some of those things. And so don't feel like you need to have all the answers. What we are looking for in your application is are you aware of what you're getting into in terms of research? We're not looking for people that have published 4 articles in the top journals. That would be phenomenal coming out of a PhD program, certainly not necessarily going into it. But if you can get involved, Sophie has posted about the Academy of Management. This is one of our primary organizations. There are geographic kind of sub versions of this that you can try to get papers into that are much more open to accepting early stage work than the major conference that we have every year. These are just ways that you can indicate to us, look, I'm serious about research, I'm serious about doing this. And then that can facilitate your entrance into our broader community. So just delighted that you're here with us today, and honored that we've been able to connect with so many people from all over the world.
Thank you. Sophie?
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for more resources to place in the chat. Well, this is so relevant what you all said, so I don't want to repeat. Yes, we're inclusive. Yes, the community is wonderful. I think it's all about the people and the great, the great joy and luxury of asking questions that matter and trying to, well, individually during a PhD, but very much so collectively answer them. I think it's a beautiful profession. As again, we said, we are training the PhD students towards getting a tenure track professorship at a top research school. And it's a wonderful profession. You get to decide many things, what you want to study, with whom, how, which methods, in which field, which country. So please, join us, and we hope very much that we debunked a lot of myth maybe today. I'm very grateful to see many of you today. So thank you, and thank you, Greg, wonderful leader and moderator in this event.
Thanks. Regan?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And just to echo a couple of quick thoughts, I agree with everybody. And this is just such a great career that if you're thinking about it now, I mean, I thought about it for many, many years before I went and did my PhD. And eventually I just had to jump in with both feet and say, I'm going to go and do this. And for me, it proved to be more entrepreneurial than being an entrepreneur, if that's even possible. So it's really, if you're into ideas, if you're into solving puzzles, if you're driven by your own curiosity, then this is a great career for you. And you actually don't have all of those burdens that we have as entrepreneurs, such as, buildings or people that need your presence there all the time. So you're really just driven entirely by your own intellectual curiosity. So I encourage you to take the GMAT, apply broadly, and hopefully we see you at Indiana.
Cool. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think on the diversity note, just really quickly, this relates to kind of the job market conversation, but I've seen a ton of jobs, open jobs being posted over the course of the last several months to expand diversity in the business schools, and very, very explicit of trying to get more diverse opinions, whether it's gender, race, ethnicity, what have you. And so I think that's a fantastic indicator that business schools are serious about this. And so if I were applying right now to programs, I would be very encouraged by some of the gestures that these schools are making to try and take advantage of diverse opinions and perspectives. And so, I certainly encourage everybody to go after this. As I was once told, let other people, eliminate your chances. Don't let yourself eliminate your chances. Apply, try, and see what happens, because there are crazy things that happen in terms of how these decisions are made and where people end up in PhD programs. So just, if you think it's a cool fit for you, take a shot at it. And I know that you'd be well taken care of here at Indiana. And I'd love to broaden our tent, as Jeff referred to it as. So hope to meet you all in person. And if I can be of help, please just email me.
Great advice. Thank you. Emily?
Sure. Well, I like to say that the P in PhD stands for perseverance. And so I would just encourage you to not give up, especially in your first year when it's a bit of an adjustment and a lot of people are questioning why they went into the program. I would just encourage you to keep going, persevere through it, because I know the career afterwards, after the PhD program, is rewarding. It's a great community and it's going to be worth it. So just keep going, persevere through it. You can do it.
Thank you. Devin?
Yeah, I just want to also echo what Brian was saying about, other people sort of making the decision for you. I remember when I applied to Indiana, I was talking with one of my close mentors and advisors, and he was like, or I said something to the effect of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in. And he immediately shut me down and he was like, that's not your decision. They make that decision. And so I applied and, got in and it's amazing. And what I love about entrepreneurship in particular is that it provides so much freedom, freedom of thought. It's so interdisciplinary with psychology, sociology, economics, like the list goes on from the types of topics that you can pull from. And so you can just really take this career wherever you want, and not only freedom in terms of thought, but also freedom in terms of, your personal life. Yeah, I definitely encourage you to apply. I love it, and I know you will too.
Thank you. Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd echo pretty much everything that's been said. The only thing I'd add is, this is a great time. Like Jeff said earlier, this is a great career path. It's certainly exciting already to me in the transition, even as a fairly young student. But if you're on this call, you're already ahead of the game. You're paying attention in a way that I think a lot of people aren't. So I think take advantage of that. You've got an advantage now. And this is a great time to get into this space.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all our panelists. Thank you to all of you for attending. If there are things that haven't been addressed and you really feel they need to be addressed, you've all got my email because I sent you the registration details via my email. Feel free to email me and I'm happy to channel your emails to any of the panelists if I feel they're better positioned to answer them. We hope that you've gotten a lot from this. And we appreciate that you were willing to dedicate this time to spend with us so that we can close some of those information gaps and hopefully put you in a better position to make good decisions about your future. So thanks very much, everybody. We look forward to hopefully getting some of your applications or to meeting you at future academy events and other academic events as you pursue this as part of your career. Awesome.